Well, thank you very much. I'm going to quickly run through this presentation very, very quickly, because I know what all of our shareholders want to know is what's going on at site. But we're going to save the good stuff to the end. So let us begin. My name is Lewis Black. I'm CEO and founder of Almonty Industries. We are the largest tungsten producer outside of China, and we are currently fully financed, under construction, the world's largest tungsten mine in South Korea. Basically, as I said, we've done this for a great deal of time. Our mine in Portugal is running for 126 years. We acquired the Sandon Project nearly 6 years ago now, which is considered to be the only really true tier 1 tungsten project globally. We have financed it. It was a long and laborious process, but it's financed, equity is done, debt is done, construction is underway. This mine at a high level is 90 plus years of reserves, so it's very comparable to our Portuguese mine, which is running 126 years. And ultimately, we will account for about 30% of non-Chinese supply. Tungsten market is one of these markets that very few people really grasp its strategic importance, because there are so few players given the dominance of domination of China and Russia. But again, at a very high level, it's in everything. Everything that matters needs tungsten. A little bit of tungsten, but without that tungsten, you cannot produce military defense, semiconductors, oil and gas drilling, battery applications, car manufacturing, aerospace. So there's a whole plethora of industries that are entirely dependent on small amounts of tungsten to actually come to fruition. And finally on this slide, probably the most important part of our location is that South Korea happens to be the largest consumer per capita in the world of tungsten. So this is a snapshot of our company. Look, I mean, we've had a sell-off on our stock recently. We've had one shareholder in Europe who has aggressively sold down their position. He's not part of our core group. It is what it is. I see now that seems to be over. I think we'll start to return to our norm and continue to appreciate as the market starts to understand and grasp how far along we are. We only know tungsten, and we only focus in countries that allow us to sleep well at night, as well as the fact that our customers demand total transparency given the nature of the businesses that they are in. So I think 2 months ago, Apple announced they weren't buying tungsten any longer from Russia. Apple is indicative of all of our customers. They require absolute transparency of their supply chain. Therefore, we operate only in jurisdictions where we can guarantee that transparency. Tungsten price has been stable now for some time. As I said, it's a 48% rise in the last year. What's interesting is, as we've seen demand flatten given the current economic situation, global economic situation, the price of tungsten has not really corrected to the downside. And ultimately, this means that if we stay in and around these levels during the next 12 months, as demand returns en masse, we are going to see quite extraordinary levels of tungsten pricing achieved, which, fortunately enough, will coincide as we commission Sandon. As they say, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart, but it would obviously be an enormous bonus for us if these prices do strengthen as predicted as we open. In terms of the geopolitical tensions that exist, Korea imports 94.7% of their tungsten from China, and is the largest consumer per capita in the world. But this is predominantly in hard metals, which is essentially car and boat, ship manufacturing, semiconductors. You use a tungsten gas in every semiconductor, and now these niobium tungsten batteries, they use a nano size fraction on the anodes and the cathodes. So Korea is a very dynamic tungsten consuming market. It's seen double-digit growth now for a number of years, and is highly coveted by our sector to supply because of its growth potential. and continuing growth. China and Russia dominate tungsten output. Roughly just under 90% of the world's tungsten is produced by those two countries. In 2018, the US Congress passed National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act, defining tungsten as a critical metal. Subsequently, there's been more bills that have gone into the Senate that also classify tungsten as a rare earth metal as well. So I think essentially every territory that we deal with, whether it be the EU, the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Australia, all classify tungsten as a critical raw material because of the result of the high supply risk and the enormous economic importance that tungsten generates. Its main consumers are automotive, mining, industrial, energy, construction, aerospace, consumer defense, and a number of smaller applications like screens on your phones and the vibrator in your phone and guidance systems on satellites. But ultimately, it is a backbone metal of modern global economic activity. And nano tungsten oxide is one of the applications that, as tungsten has transitioned from being an industrial metal into a technology metal, these are one of the applications. And this is what they use to coat anodes and cathodes. And it also produces the tungsten hexafluoride, which is the gas you pump into every semiconductor. And I think we're all very aware of the current crisis that exists regarding semiconductor supply. Sandon. It's a tier 1 project. I don't think I have to say much more on that. It's, we are subsequent still a tier 3 company, slowly capturing the enormity of this project that we've now financed. So it's going to be, I would imagine, a great onward journey as we move towards commissioning from a value perspective as a shareholder. And I am the second largest shareholder, so obviously that's very important to me. The project is enormous. It's obviously in a very secure and transparent location in South Korea. And South Korea is obviously one of the leading economies of the world. We are very fortunate to be building a mine in such an environment. But the project itself is an extraordinary resource. I think I couldn't do justice just on one slide. It runs at around 2.5 to 3.5 times the average grade of anything that exists in China. Its longevity is unmatched. Ultimately, it was previously, in its previous incarnation, the world's largest producing tungsten mine. It accounted for 30% of GDP in Korea in the 50s. So this mine has a legendary status within the tungsten sector. This is the project management team. As I always say when I come to this slide in any presentation, not the greatest looking bunch of, the best looking bunch of guys in the world, but their knowledge in tungsten is unmatched. Most of these guys are 4th or 5th generation tungsten guys. And that means they have enormous ability to be ahead of the curve in development and working problems as you build or reopen any tungsten mine. And they are recognized this globally. In terms of peer groups, well, this is a difficult slide. Peer groups, given the current market, is probably an unfair comparison. But certainly it stands out, Sandon, quite extraordinarily in terms of grade and longevity. So in terms of cost, we are great operators. But what we have in Sandon is great. And I think any operator will tell you that there are very few things that you can, if you don't have them, you have an uphill struggle. You need longevity and you need grade. If you have those two factors, you can compete with the best in the business. Even if you really struggle at knowing what you're doing, which we don't, of course. We know exactly what we're doing, but it means that it gives us an enormous ability to compete with the largest producing territories of China and Russia because of that grade. And this is before we even consider items like the hard floor that we have on our optics. But if we just look in a purely, abstract way, the grade and our longevity and our location and our cost curve is such that we will be able to effectively compete with our main competitors for the next 2 to 3 generations. This is just really to give an indication of size. You can see that the portal here, the size of this deposit, again, is vast. We know something about 2 of our 10 areas. So we have 10 sectors within the Sandon ore body, and we know something about 2 of them, and that gives us 90+ years. We know one of the third areas was looked at previously by the government and Korea Tungsten when it was still in business at the end of the 90s, where they found also vast amounts of high grade and larger amounts of high grade tungsten. So this deposit is unmatched, unrivaled anywhere in the world. And I can say that with some conviction. It is an enormous deposit. We are fully financed. We are supported by both the KfW IPEX Bank, the German State Bank, and OEKB, the Austrian Export Credit Bank. We have in place for 45% of our output, which is what the entire project is modeled on, a contract, 15-year offtake contract with the Party GDP group. We have a floor price built into that offtake, ensuring that in the worst case of the price ever collapsed, we would lock in upside earnings of between 10 to 12 million US a year, but we have no cap on the upside. And that's very important to note, that we will be the beneficiaries of increasing prices, but we will not pay the price of a collapsed price due to the over domination that one territory has in this sector. And if that ever happens, we are prepared for it. We also have in place a $20 million cost overrun guarantee, and Planty has continued to support us in this journey. Construction's underway. I mean, we're about 6 months ahead of schedule underground, which I'm happy about and encouraged. As I recently announced, our block models have proven to be extraordinarily conservative, which is exactly how we like to have them as operators. It's better to be surprised than disappointed. I think further adjustments, revisions to our reserve statements will be forthcoming once we finish this next stage that we're working on underground, to then bring our block models probably into greater accuracy, but ultimately it's all on the upside. We are all in for a good, pleasant surprise. As I said, the grade is extraordinary, but as operators, we struggle to even find barren areas to put adits, access ramps, which is traditionally what you would do. You don't want to go through any of the ore body when you're just essentially putting in an access ramp. It's almost impossible in this project. The ore is everywhere. Within 2 meters of our portal, you find ore. So I suppose the good news is we have ore, and that we are ahead of schedule, which means that as I commission, I will hold roughly 9 months of reserves on surface stockpile. This will ensure that I don't have any bottleneck issues underground. I like to have more than enough on surface to ensure that I'm not going to be disrupted in those early few months as we ramp up our throughput. These are the key milestones. As we said, we will look to commission basically at the beginning of Q3 of next year. So let us see at the moment, touch wood, everything is on track, but my focus is budgets rather than dates. Even though I'm confident we're going to make our dates, my focus absolutely is, given the current climate that we're in with all the inflation pressures, that I ensure that I meet my budgets faithfully. It's very easy to go on spending sprees while going through, you have all this money, the bank is fully supportive, everyone is happy, we're all very excited, we're in a rush to the finish line, and then you find yourself short in the 11th hour and you have to go back and find more money, and of course that's normally a brutal cost in that money. So we are staying on budget, whatever happens. I'm going to ensure that this is the single focus point of the team. We must respect budget. We'll talk very briefly at the Panasqueira. Firstly, we have a great love for Panasqueira. This mine has provided to us the tools to be able to build Sandon. And by saying that, I mean that ultimately the knowledge contained within this mine has given us an enormous operational advantage to be able to faithfully and accurately reopen the world's largest tungsten mine. I think if you do any kind of research on tungsten, you find that the vast majority of projects, they have a number of operational issues. This is no disparagement to any of our colleagues, but knowledge is key. And the speed in which you can bring these projects in line and basically up to full output is the key. The longer it drags on at the start, the more painful and it is for not just the company, but also for the shareholders. But the knowledge we have in this mine has meant that we've been able to redesign an early 20th century design project in Sandon and bring it into the 21st century to comply to the highest levels of ESG. And we've been able to do that not with consultants or basically external experts. We've done it because we already have this knowledge contained within the company. This is an overview of what we have under our belt. We have and will continue to back tungsten. We believe our customers have a level of loyalty and commitment to us because the level of transparency they demand is not going to diminish anytime soon, and diversification is very important. And so essentially, as I said, we're now under construction. This is going to give an indication of when we commission. It's going to have a profound effect on our revenue and our earnings. Of course it will. We're building something which no one's built a tungsten mine reopened a tungsten mine like this in more than a generation. The last one we saw was in China, which is the Sino Moly. They produce it's a moly mine which also produces tungsten and is currently the largest producer of tungsten in the world. So this is a unique opportunity for the company. So to conclude, this is a world-class mine. There's no doubt in our sector's mine. We have financing is done. We have an enormous increase in demand as this metal is consumed in greater quantities by the technology side. As we announced recently, about 1.4 kilos is contained within an EV. This will increase as the electrical components are actually advanced within the EVs in the next 2 to 3 years to around 2 kilos. And once we see sort of tungsten niobium technology really embraced in the rest of the manufacturers, not just in South Korea, we're going to see that increase to around 2.5 kilos, which doesn't sound much, but when the entire world's output of tungsten is 98,000 tons a year, you can see there is an impending squeeze on supply. We are considered to be, and I'm not ashamed to say this, we're considered to be the best operational team outside of China and one of the best in the world. We've done this for a long time. This is what we do. We don't know anything about gold, or we don't know anything about silver or copper. We know a little bit about copper. We know tungsten. And to conclude, we are now under construction. So, Matthias, before you ask a question, every shareholder is going to say, where are the pictures of construction?
Yes.
Well, we are updating our website. It's an ongoing process. We are actually currently preparing for a big visit next week, actually, from our lenders, KfW, where we're going to be talking about not just the progress at site, but also we're talking about downstreaming. So you have to forgive us, but ultimately, putting up pictures of loaders is not, it's not practical at this time. What we're working on here is the design work. Underground was the most important for me to get ahead of the curve on. This was very important. But be assured, third drawdown is about to be made. We are right on schedule. All equipment except one drive will all be in country by the end of this year. All manufactured equipment. So water treatment, mills, everything. Mills will start to be assembled shortly. So Matthias, over to you.
All right. Yeah, great presentation as always. And we have already quite a lot of questions in the chat. So let's see how many we can answer in the 9 minutes that we have left.
Okay.
So first of all, will Almonty start processing some of the ore that has been piled during the underground development before Sandong begins commercial production in 2023?
Yes, we are doing on a pilot plant to ensure that we can keep looking at our process. We are doing this predominantly in Europe. We're shipping the ore to Europe to pass in Portugal, mainly because it's easier for my guys to get to rather than have them stand in South Korea at this time. And also I want focus at site on construction, not at, you know, experimentation. But in terms of passing bulk, no, we will not be. But mainly because we can't mill the ore that brings to surface. What brings to surface is unmilled. Maybe when the mills are constructed and we start to feed the ore through the mills, perhaps I'll look at that. But at this time, we have no intention outside of the few hundred kilos that we process through the pilot plant.
Mm-hmm. Good. And Almonty recently communicated that you found another crucial metal in Sandong. What was it again? And can you comment on what you have detected and what timeline for commercialization is planned?
Well, we didn't discover it. The government in Korea Tungsten already knew it was there. It's molybdenum. So Korea is the 4th largest importer of molybdenum in the world. So it's a very voracious consumer of this metal, and it sits around 150 meters horizontally from our existing infrastructure. So from an operational cost perspective, it's very cheap for us to get in there. It is again a high-grade, vast deposit. Generally, you find moly as a byproduct of copper production. So there's very few moly mines. There's a number of very large ones in China, but basically in the West or in developing countries or consumption in the West, you find it as a byproduct. But given that it's so close to our existing infrastructure, it becomes very cost effective to get there. And given that we're in a country that is a very large consumer of this product, and we wouldn't even be able to supply from this mine any more than around 25% than what is currently consumed, we would obviously find a lot of support internally. We are continuing to drill it. My plan is I wish to take my recently released JORC from 43101 and convert somewhere in the region of 10 to 12 years into proven and probable. That is the plan through the drilling program, because you can spend a vast amount on drilling, but in my mind, anything past 10 years of proven and probable, and then obviously all the inferred following up behind it is more than adequate. But yes, we are working on that. We are in discussion with company consumers within South Korea. And yes, we will continue to fuel growth from that model as well. We own it 100%, so it is very advantageous for us to look at developing that as well.
Okay, and the next question is: Have concrete slabs and foundations been laid for the dump hopper and process plant?
Not yet, but that doesn't mean that they're not ready. But we haven't laid them yet. We want to finish the detailed studies, detailed engineering studies, and then basically continue to review them. The build itself, not that it's ever very straightforward, is in this instance, we're not building the Taj Mahal, we're building a plant, foundations. What's more important, the planning to me, is where we have to be obsessive. One of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, the only thing that's going to be arriving outside of this year is a drive from one of the mills. It's going to arrive in January. It's going to arrive because at Almonty, we continue to review all the plans. And we saw that this one drive on one of the mills was in fact going to impede the walkway for the maintenance. And we know that, it would be problematic to always have to navigate around this drive when you're running maintenance. So we asked Metal Watertech to redo it. They missed this when they did their planning, and it's being redone. We're taking exactly the same approach with this plant and the construction. We are going to keep going through these plans, literally meter by meter, foot by foot, to ensure that when we pull the trigger to pour concrete, every single element of this has gone over. That means, of course, from an optical point of view, you're going to have to wait to see the pour longer than you perhaps would like. But know that when we pour, we know every single foot, every single meter that's going to be constructed already. And we've already gone through it, not through just the CAD system, but we've literally done a visual walkthrough to check that every single component has been analyzed correctly.
Right. Probably similar in the same token. So what will be the last part of the construction required to begin commercial production at Sandon, and what are the time pressures on that part?
Well, I mean, the ore is ready. The mine will be ready. The processing plant is flotation. So ultimately, we're not waiting for gravity tables. We don't have to, it's a chemical process to treat this material. So we have a very predictable scheduling in terms of the throughput, because we are using chemicals rather than gravity. Gravity, I love gravity. As a tungsten operator, gravity is one of the joys of working with tungsten. But it takes a long time to balance those tables. Panascara mine has the highest recoveries in the world through gravity, and yet it took 40 years to get it that good. Flotation is chemical. It's a question of a recipe, which we already have from the pilot plant and all the work we've done over the last 5 years. So I think ultimately my biggest fear is inflationary cost escalation. And that's what I'm focused on. In terms of the equipment I need, I'm not reinventing the wheel. Remember, we ordered equipment. We started construction of equipment beginning of last year. So we're not looking at bottlenecks. We're not looking at delays. If we'd ordered earlier this year when we closed the loan, I would be extremely nervous. I'd be looking at least 40% more cost. I'd be looking at delays on those mills of more than 2 years. It would be a miserable, miserable experience. But I think the most important thing to remember, we are, whether you agree with it or not, we are essentially in a recession right now. We are a fully financed mine building in a recession. When this recession, we start to come out of it during next year, we will be opening. I think that we can look at historically, any project that has the advantage of riding out a recession in construction and being open when that recession ceases and global demand returns with a vengeance. It is normally an enormously beneficial period in the time of that project, in those first 2 to 3 years, because no one else is going to be financing anytime soon. So my focus right now is I have to be open, ready to capture that upside as global demand returns. Yeah,
thank you for all these answers, but we already ran out of time.
Oh, sorry,
There's so many questions in the chat. I think we can try to forward them to you if they are really interested in the answers.
No problem. You send them over, and I will get typing.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you again. As always, great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matthias. Take care.